Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead. It is a beautiful but brisk morning here on the homestead. It was 44 degrees when I first came out this morning. It feels great to be getting a break from the summer heat. Sarah's out of town this week due to a death in the family, so if you could all be praying for safe travels for her and peace and comfort for her family, we sure would appreciate that. That leaves me here on the homestead to get everything done that needs to be done. So let's start this morning with our morning chores. Good morning, girls. Good morning, Myrtle. There you go, Betty. Good morning, Charlie. There you go, big guy.
Shout of praise. Oh, there's only one name. We lift up a shout. We lift up a shout. Oh, together we sing. We lift up a shout. We lift up a shout of praise.
Morning, Silkies.
Shout of praise. Oh, there's only one name. We lift up a shout. We lift up a shout. Oh, together we sing. We lift up a shout. We lift up a shout of praise. Let the anthem rise up, let the song ring out, let the ground now tremble as we raise a shout. Let the anthem rise up,
There it goes.
let the song ring
Come on,
out,
go!
and let the ground now tremble as we raise a shout. Oh, there's only one name. We lift up a shout. We lift up a shout. Oh, together we sing. We lift up a shout.
Come on, go!
We lift up a shout. Oh, there's only one name. We lift up a shout. Lift up a shout. Shout, lift up a shout of praise. We lift up a shout of praise.
Well, now that morning chores are done, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you guys about something that's kind of been on my mind for the last few days. As many of you know, we are in the process of moving from what we call our homestead property to our farm property, and that has included packing up everything that we own once again and moving. Now, it's a lot different this time. We're not moving across the country. We're not, making a huge change as far as quitting jobs and moving to the country and all of that. In fact, just about 3 months ago, we passed the 6-year mark here in Missouri, and you guys, we don't want to be anywhere but right here in Southwest Missouri. We absolutely love it. But as I was sorting through everything in the barn for the last few days and getting things ready to move, it got me thinking back to what it was like when we were still living in the city, when we were getting ready to move out to the country, and some of the things that I wish that I had known then that I know now. There's a lot of those that I wish I had thought about learning in the years where we were planning on moving and not waited until we got out here. So I wanted to talk to you guys about just a few of those today, and hopefully it will help some of you who may be where we were 6 or 7 years ago, thinking about moving to the country and thinking, what do we need to do? What do we need to get ready? And hopefully this will shorten your learning curve once you're out in the country. So the first thing, since we're right here, that I want to talk to you about, and this came to mind as I was packing up one of our barns and I started to look through all of the supplies that I had acquired for electric fencing over the last 6 years. When we lived in the city, we had a lot of animals. We had an acre of land, and so we raised quite a few animals on our property in the city, but we never used electric fencing. I'm not exactly sure why. I think because it was easier on a small scale just to use regular fencing, and we didn't really have to deal with electric fencing. But once we got out to the country, I realized quickly that this was something that I needed to learn, and I wish that I had learned it sooner, because for the first couple of years that we were out here, I was actually pretty intimidated by electric fencing. But you guys, since that time, it's now my go-to thing. If I need to put a fence up quickly, or I want to cross-fence something, or I just want to keep animals in a certain area, electric fencing is the way to go 100%. So this is a skill that I really feel like you need to start to learn. If you're still in the city in a normal backyard, just, fence off a small area with electric fencing. Maybe an area to try to keep some chickens in a certain area or something like that. Or if you really don't have the room to do it, at the very least, go online, watch some videos about how to set up electric fencing and get comfortable with it, because once you're in the country, it really is going to be something that is going to save you a ton of time. It's going to make a secure area for your animals. And like in our situation here on our farm property, we have miles and miles and miles of old fencing that isn't quite bad enough to tear down, but I don't 100% trust anymore either to keep the animals in. And by running an electric wire just on the inside of that fencing, which takes no time at all, we can keep using that old fencing for many, many more years. It gives me peace of mind knowing that the animals won't cross the electric fence. And you guys, it is just something that I absolutely think you need to master if you're going to live the homesteading lifestyle. The next thing on my list is welding. This is something that I think everybody needs to know at least the basics of. It's something that, to be honest, I thought for a long time I didn't need to learn how to do. But after we've been out here for several years, I really started to realize this is an essential skill if you're going to live in the country and you need things to be able to keep working. I'll give you a quick story. I was out bush hogging down in our bottomland. I turned around to look at the bush hog behind my tractor, and I realized that I'd hit a stump and the back wheel on my bush hog completely broke off. So that ended my bush hogging for the day. I couldn't keep going, so I had to go find all the parts. I realized that the metal fork that holds the wheel actually snapped. So I found all the parts. I came back up by the house, jumped online, ordered the parts that I needed, but then realized that it was going to take 6 weeks to get the parts that I needed to replace on the tractor. That meant for the next 6 weeks, I couldn't use my bush hog at all behind my tractor, and it was the time of year when I really needed it. It just so happens that that following week, my brother was coming down to visit, and my brother is a good welder. So when he came, I was telling him about having to order this part and how long it would take, and he said, well, why don't we just go buy you a cheap welder, I'll teach you how to weld, and we'll get that part fixed in about 30 minutes. So that's what we did. We went to Harbor Freight. I picked up this little cheap welder right here. It was about $200. A welding table, a few other accessories. I think total it cost me about $300 for everything that I needed. And within an afternoon, my brother taught me how to do just simple welding. This is just what's called a flux core welder. It is a real simple thing to use. It just plugs into a regular 110 outlet. It's very simple, but with that, we were able to fix that part on my tractor, and I was able to get back to what I was doing. If I had had that skill weeks earlier, I would have been able to bring that part back up, fix it, put it back on the tractor, and get right back to work. So this is a skill that I absolutely think if you're going to be out in the country and you need things to be working when you need them to be working, or you need to do some structural things, this is something that you need to learn. You don't need to learn how to do it pretty. What I always say is, I can't weld pretty, but I can stick two pieces of metal together, and really, from a farming or homesteading aspect, that's what you need to be able to do, just be able to keep things working. The next thing on my list is basic veterinary care. If you're going to be raising animals on your homestead and you're living out in the country, there's not always a vet close by. And even if there is a vet that will do farm calls, they're not always available when you need them. Not to mention, you can save a lot of money by doing some things yourself. Now, if something is serious, you should always check with a vet. But you guys, learning some basic veterinary care for your animals is absolutely essential. Now, I'll admit, I had a little bit of a leg up in this area because that's actually what I went to school for. I went to school to be a veterinary technician. But I mostly worked with cats and dogs, and for a while I worked with a veterinarian who mostly did reptiles. So I didn't have a lot of experience with farm animals. Of course, some of it carried over, but there are quite a few things that I wish that I had taken the time to learn before we moved out to the country that would have made things easier when we first got here. I've gotten pretty comfortable with everything now, but you guys, I would highly recommend that you learn for every animal that you think you might want to raise, at least where you should give them shots, how you should give them shots, if you need to do vaccines, if you need to draw blood, if you have an animal that's sick and you need to give them an antibiotic or something like that, you need to know the best place to do that on each of the animals, and you need to know that you can do it in a safe way. It also wouldn't be a bad idea to get yourself a good reference book that you can have on hand so that if there's a lot going on and you kind of get flustered and don't remember what you need to know, you have a reference to look at so that you can do what you need to do to help your animals in that situation. The other thing is you need to learn that sometimes it's best to just leave the animals alone. I'll give you a quick example that happened just this week. About 3 days ago, there was a night that I came out to feed the pigs, and Myrtle, right here, didn't get up to come to eat. And I thought, well, that's really strange. So I went and I looked in her hut, and she was in there asleep. I kind of poked her a little bit. I mean, she was breathing, and all in all, she looked fine. But she just didn't want to get up and eat that night, which is very strange for Myrtle because normally Myrtle is trying to eat everybody's food. So I could have very well gotten very concerned and tried to do a lot to Myrtle and, really went over the top. But I decided, you know what? I'm going to just wait. They've had a lot of, stressful days lately. They moved down here. They're in an all new area. There's new grasses to eat and things like that. I looked through. I knew there was nothing in their pen that was poisonous. So I just figured, you know what? I'm going to wait until morning and see what happens. And wouldn't you know, by the next morning, she was right back up. A little sluggish, but, back up, eating with everybody else. And by that evening, completely back to normal and has been ever since. So you guys, you need to learn basic veterinary skills and when not to intervene with your animals. The next thing on my list is tractor implements. This is something that you know, I didn't have a tractor when we lived in the city, and when we first moved out here, I knew that it was something, that a tractor was something I wanted to get pretty much right away when we moved out to the country. I just knew that it was a tool that I was going to need. And you guys, I highly recommend, if you leave the city and move to the country and you can afford to buy a tractor, even if it's a cheap used tractor, buy a tractor. You may not think right away that you're going to need it, but you will. And if you plan on doing anything on any type of scale, you are going to need a tractor at some point. For instance, right now, we need to feed our cows in the winter. The bales of hay that we use are 800 to 1,000 pounds each. That's not possible if you don't have a tractor. So we need a tractor to move those around. But we use the tractor for a lot of things. You guys see us use it for a lot here on the homestead. And when I first moved out here to the country, I went to a tractor store, you know, and I bought the tractor that I wanted. And they tried to get me to buy a bunch of implements because they were going to make me a good deal if I bought a lot of things right at the same time. And some of the things I just wasn't sure whether or not I needed. So I didn't buy a whole lot right then and there. There's some things I regret. I wish I would have purchased when I bought my tractor because I probably would have gotten a better deal on them up front. And there are some things that I probably didn't really need that I ended up purchasing. So you can see behind me, I have my bush hog here in the middle. I have my tiller over here. Those are both essential in my opinion. Over here on this side I've got a rock rake. I use that occasionally. That's one of the things that I could probably do without, but it has served its purpose a few times. The other thing is, if you know what type of implements you need, you can always be on the lookout for them. Let's walk over this way a little bit and I'll show you a couple of implements that I actually ended up getting for free. Here's two implements that I was able to get free of charge. This first one here, this is what's called a middle buster. It's got kind of like a plow here on the bottom, and what this is used for is to dig out big rocks or roots and things like that when you're first getting a new area ready for gardening. This, especially here in Missouri, has come in handy many, many times. I was actually given this by a friend of mine. He didn't need it anymore, and he actually ended up trading me for some tomatoes. So I was very happy to get that. And then here, this is a scraper blade. This can go on the back of the tractor to scrape rocks or dirt. It can also be used at an angle to dig small ditches, which is actually what I've done along the sides of our driveway. And this was actually given to me by the original owners of this property. When they sold everything else that was here that they wanted to get rid of, they asked me if I thought I could use this for the driveway. I said yes, and they gifted this to me along with the property. So I was super happy to get that, and I've used it many, many times since then. So this implement is called a fence unroller, and this can actually hold a big roll of field fencing, like a 330-foot roll of field fencing, and this goes on the back of the tractor so you can just drive and unroll the fencing as you go. When we lived in the city, I never really used big rolls of fencing because I never had anything that heavy to unroll. But I'll tell you, the first time that you try to unroll a big roll of fencing up a hill, you'll learn quickly that this is a very good implement to have. They're not very expensive. I picked this up at Tractor Supply several years ago. You guys have seen us use it. It can also be used for pulling the fence tight when you get to the end of the row. So you guys, your needs may be different. I'm just showing you an example of a couple of the things, or a few of the things that I've acquired over the last 6 years that we've been out here. But do your research. Learn what's out there. Learn what might make your life a little bit easier. And then, come up with a plan for how you may get those things once you move on to your homestead. The next thing on my list is basic building skills. This is an area where I'll admittedly feel like I'm still not very good at. But I have acquired enough skills to build things that I do need. Now, I'm not building our own house. I didn't build my own workshop. But I have acquired the skills over time to build basic structures like these hoop coops that we use for our chickens and ducks. I can build rabbit cages. I can build quail cages. All of the things like that we need. And you guys, that is something that you can definitely start learning while you're still in a neighborhood. If you're going to get some quail, don't go out and buy quail cages. Build your own. Figure out that you can do it. Like a lot of things on the homestead, it's a matter of doing it. A lot of things are intimidating until you do it the first time, but over time, you'll learn that you can do it. It doesn't really matter whether or not it turns out perfect. You guys hear me say all the time, the chickens never complain. They don't care if things aren't perfectly square. You guys, you can do it. You can acquire the skills over time, and having those basic building skills is going to make your life a lot easier. It's going to save you a ton of money, and in the long run, it gives you a lot more sense of accomplishment that you're doing the things that need to be done on your own homestead. Well, there you go, you guys. Those are just a few things that I think are essential skills that you will want to know once you start living this homesteading rural lifestyle. These are things that you can realistically start practicing or learning about while you're still living in the city, and they'll give you a leg up once you move out to the country. You can see that we're still waiting for the house. It hasn't come quite yet. I know some of you thought you could see it in the background of the last video, but I can promise you it's not here yet. You can see the empty foundation behind us. We do have everything arranged. If nothing changes as far as weather and everything else, it should be coming next week and being put on the foundation, and then hopefully it won't be long after that we can actually move down here to the farm property. Until then, we're busy moving buildings and everything else. As you know, all of the animals are now here. So you guys, this is an exciting time. We're glad that you are along to just watch all of this unfold. And we just look back at the excitement that we had when we first started this. And I feel like part of this process of moving again and doing all of this has kind of brought some of that excitement back. So we're really, really looking forward to the future here on this property. You guys, don't forget that the absolute best way that you can help us here on the homestead is just to share our videos on all of your social media so that other like-minded people might benefit from them as well. And as always, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care, and God bless.